Welcome in, everyone. Pull up a stool. Uh, get comfortable.
Yeah, imagine we're just settling in at your favorite local tap room.
You know the exact spot I'm talking about. The lighting is low, it's warm.
Get an incredibly cozy atmosphere.
Exactly. And there's that low, rhythmic hum of genuinely good conversation carrying through the room.
The best kind of background noise, really.
Right. And whether you're a seasoned brewer who, spends your weekends completely geeking out over water chemistry profiles,
Or yeast pitch rates.
yeah, or if you're just a casual sipper who enjoys trying whatever hazy pale ale happens to be on tap, or even if you're just someone who loves a fantastic, well-researched story served up alongside your glass, you are in exactly the right place today.
You absolutely are.
Because we are going to be unpacking a lot of history today, but I promise you this isn't going to feel like a dry, dusty lecture.
It definitely won't be a lecture. We are exploring something quite unique today.
We really are.
We're looking at a piece of source material that manages to take the vast, sometimes intimidating, and heavily scientific world of beverage history, and it distills it.
Pun intended.
Always. It distills it into something highly accessible and deeply rooted in local community.
I've been poring over this one all week.
Same. I've been
Okay.
looking at the author's notes, the illustrations, the specific historical markers they chose to highlight, and it provides this surprisingly fresh perspective on traditions we often just take for granted.
Right. We think we know why we celebrate certain holidays with certain drinks.
Exactly. But the historical bedrock beneath those traditions is usually much more complex and, frankly, much more fascinating than the commercialized versions we see today.
I am genuinely excited for this one. So today we are taking a deep dive into a brand new book that was just released in November of 2025.
Brand new to the shelves.
Yep. It is the first book in what is going to be a series. It's called Daryl on a Barrel Dash, A Year in Beer.
Great title.
It is. Now, before we get any further into the weeds, I want to introduce the minds behind this project. The author and illustrator is Michelle Traver.
And we should clarify that pronunciation right off the bat.
Good call. For everyone listening, I want to make sure you have that locked in. It is pronounced with a long A sound, so it's Traver.
Traver, right.
She created this entire universe alongside her husband and co-creator, Daryl. And just to keep things feeling conversational and in the spirit of the taproom vibe they've cultivated, we are exclusively going to refer to them as Michelle and Daryl from here on out.
Which I think is the right move. I mean, approachability is the core thesis of what they've built here.
Totally.
If we're going to analyze their work, we really should adopt their ethos.
Okay, let's unpack this. What exactly are we looking at here physically?
The physical book itself makes a statement, actually.
It really does. It's an 8.5 by 11-inch perfect bound book.
And those dimensions matter.
Yeah, they do. It's not some tiny utilitarian pocket guide that you just stuff into a kitchen drawer and forget about.
Right, it has a substantial footprint.
It's designed to be a companion piece. You can easily picture it sitting right there on a coffee table, or even better, laid flat on a heavy, reclaimed wood bar top.
Acting as a total conversation starter.
Exactly. And the structure takes you on this chronological journey through the calendar, month by month, pairing the spirit of various holidays with the perfect beer style.
Which is such a clever framework. It's basically a Trojan horse for education.
Oh, I like that. How so?
Well, by structuring it around the calendar, they bypass the trap of reading like a technical manual.
Yeah, nobody wants a textbook at the bar.
Right. You aren't going to open this and immediately find pages of chemical equations for the Krebs cycle and fermentation.
Thank goodness.
Or a dry chronological list of, grain silo developments in the 18th century.
Yeah, Daryl on a Barrel is just a fun-loving, whimsical companion. It's the kind of character you'd actually want to be hanging out with.
Exactly. It blends this really fun poetry, historical milestones, and just a massive appreciation for the communal aspect of drinking.
So our mission for this deep dive is to analyze how this playful lens helps us uncover the very real, often highly technical stories behind our traditions.
It's about reverse engineering the beverages we use to toast.
And understanding the socioeconomic and agricultural reasons we celebrate the way we do.
But to really grasp how they pulled off that balance, we have to talk about the field
The
research.
field research is incredible.
We have to talk about the creators themselves because the real-world groundwork behind this book is pretty staggering.
It is. The source material notes that Daryl and Michelle have physically visited over 300 breweries.
300.
Over 300 across 17 different U.S. states.
When I first read that statistic, I had to stop and really think about the logistical and, honestly, anthropological scale of that undertaking.
Right, because over 300 breweries across 17 states is not a casual weekend hobby.
Not at all. That is a massive data collection effort. Think about how regionalized the American craft beer scene has become.
You hugely regional.
When you visit that many distinct locations, you are dealing with entirely different state distribution laws.
Yep.
You're dealing with vastly different municipal water profiles, which fundamentally alter the chemistry of the beer,
Oh, absolutely. The water is everything.
and wildly different local agricultural outputs. I mean, a tap room in the Pacific Northwest, heavily reliant on fresh Yakima Valley hops, is going to have a completely different cultural and flavor footprint than historic lager-focused brewery in the Midwest.
Or a farmhouse ale setup in the Northeast.
Exactly. They aren't just sitting there mindlessly sampling IPAs and stouts.
Right. They are conducting a sort of grassroots cultural anthropology. They're absorbing the environment, looking at how the local community interacts with the space.
Gathering stories.
And here is the detail that really contextualizes the tone of the book. The source explicitly tells us that the majority of this book was actually written while they were sitting right there at the bar of their favorite establishments.
I love that detail. That environmental context is crucial.
I'm honestly just incredibly jealous. Imagine going to the pub as a legitimate writing retreat.
It's brilliant. But, you cannot artificially synthesize the authentic ambiance of a tap room in a sterile home office.
No, you can't.
The ambient noise, the pacing of the service, the incidental conversations happening 2 stools down, all of that bleeds into the creative process. It grounds the writing.
It does, but it also raises a question about execution, right? Because having a great time at a bar and absorbing the culture is one thing.
Sure.
Actually translating that into a cohesive, entertaining, and educational piece of literature requires a very specific skill set.
A very specific one.
And that brings us to Michelle, because she is the author and the illustrator. She's the voice and the brush behind the book.
Right.
And she has been a middle school teacher for over 25 years.
Which is saint's work, let's be honest.
Truly. But it's the subject she teaches that really caught my eye. Language arts, theater, yearbook, and life skills.
What's fascinating here is if we look closely at her academic and professional background, it really acts as the underlying engine driving the pacing of this entire project.
Oh, so.
Well, she holds a master's degree in the art of teaching from Marygrove
Okay.
and a bachelor's degree from Madonna University with a double major in English and speech communications, plus a minor in elementary education.
Wow, so she really knows how to construct a narrative.
Exactly. And I want to highlight the reality of teaching middle schoolers for 2.5 decades. Adolescents are arguably the most unforgiving, easily distracted audience on the planet.
That is a verifiable fact.
If you can consistently capture their attention, make complex or mundane ideas accessible, and keep them entertained while teaching life skills and language arts, you possess a masterclass level of narrative pacing.
That makes total sense. You have to be engaging or you lose the room immediately.
Instantly.
And her theater background clearly informs the staging and the visual storytelling in her illustrations. You can see it in how she frames the characters on the page.
Yeah, the spatial awareness in the art is great.
And her language arts background gives her the precise tools needed to craft the fun poetry woven throughout the book.
Let's talk about that poetry, actually.
Yeah.
Because the source material lists some of her primary literary influences.
Right. Robert Frost, William Blake, and Neil Part.
Which is a fascinating, highly specific triad of influences.
It really is.
You have Robert Frost, who is essentially the grandmaster of accessible, deceptively simple, nature-driven American rhythm.
Yep.
You have William Blake, who was a visionary in how he seamlessly married his own visual art, his engravings, with lyrical poetry.
Which is exactly the multimedia approach Michelle is taking with her illustrations and text.
Precisely. And then you have Neil Peart, the late legendary drummer and primary lyricist for the band Rush.
The legend.
Peart was famous for his intricate, driving, almost mathematical rhythms, combined with deeply thoughtful, observant wordplay.
So when you blend Frost's accessibility, Blake's visual textual harmony, and Pert's rhythmic precision,
you get a cadence that carries the reader effortlessly from page to page. It gives the historical facts a bounce and a momentum.
it keeps the history from feeling static.
Exactly.
And then, acting as the visual anchor for all of this, we have Daryl. He is the inspiration, the co-creator, and the literal mascot of the book.
The face of the franchise.
Yeah. The character of Daryl, this perpetually cheerful guy who pops up in lederhosen or an elf costume, depending on the month, is based directly on him.
And his background is almost too perfect for a book about global alcohol history,
It really is. He was born in Wiesbaden, Germany.
which places his origin at ground zero for some of the most strict, historically significant European brewing traditions in the world.
But the ancestral roots noted in the source go even deeper than that. His heritage traces back to Ireland, Scotland, England, and France.
It's an incredible ancestral map. His literal DNA perfectly overlays the historical capitals of the world's foundational alcohol traditions.
Right, let's break that down.
Okay, so you have Germany with its centuries of lager development and purity laws. You have Ireland, the cradle of iconic dry stouts and some of the oldest whiskey distilleries on earth.
Scotland, obviously, with its unparalleled Scotch production.
And the peat smoking traditions, yeah.
Yeah.
England, which gave us the foundational ale styles, porters, IPAs, ESBs, and basically birthed modern pub culture.
And finally, France, the undisputed historical heavyweight of terroir-driven wine, champagne, and cognac.
Exactly. The book explicitly notes that his love for beer, wine, and spirits is quite literally in his genes, along with a deep, ingrained appreciation for the historical regions that built the industry.
And what I really appreciate is how the book weaves his modern personal hobbies into this deep historical tapestry.
Yeah, the visual integration is very clever.
It adds a great layer of levity, because in real life, Daryl is a drummer. So when you are scanning the illustrations, you'll suddenly spot him playing a massive set of drums where the shells are made entirely out of wooden barrels.
I love that.
And he is also a surfer. So Michelle illustrated him out on the water, physically surfing inside a giant barrel wave.
Visual puns are the best.
They are. I love a good visual pun, but I also think it serves a purpose here. It constantly reminds the reader that while we are exploring serious agricultural history, the ultimate goal of the beverage is enjoyment.
It disarms the reader.
Yes, exactly.
The barrier to entry in the craft beer or wine world can sometimes feel incredibly high. There can be a layer of pretension.
Oh, a thick layer sometimes.
Right. So by placing a guy surfing a barrel wave next to a historical fact, they're actively stripping away that pretension. They are establishing authority through their research, but keeping the door wide open for the casual learner.
Absolutely. So let's actually walk through that door and jump into the calendar structure they've built. The first book of the series takes you on a journey through the calendar, 1 month at a time.
And I want to start by springing into April.
Okay, let's do it. The theme here is April showers bring hops.
The foundational botanical element of modern brewing.
The poetry and the imagery in the April section are so vibrant. Michelle has painted Daryl standing out in this lush, intensely green hop field. The perspective draws you down the rows of the vines.
And in the foreground, there's a wooden barrel just overflowing with freshly harvested green hops.
And the poetry reads, April showers grow fresh hops with a citrusy aroma and flavor. The bitterness that they impart, you and Daryl will love and savor.
I want to pause and elevate the discussion around that specific stanza.
Yeah, let's break it down.
Because while it sounds like a simple, pleasant rhyme, she is actually touching on some complex brewing chemistry there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. When she mentions the bitterness that they impart, she's referring to the alpha acids within the lupulin glands of the hop cone.
Okay, science time.
Right. In order to extract that bitterness to counterbalance the cloying sweetness of the malted grain, a brewer has to subject those hops to the thermal kinetic energy of a boiling kettle.
They have to boil them.
Exactly. The heat physically isomerizes the alpha acids into isoalpha acids, which dissolve into the liquid and provide that crisp, bitter backbone.
But she also specifically calls out the citrusy aroma and flavor in the poem.
Exactly. And that is a direct nod to modern craft brewing techniques, specifically dry hopping.
Oh, because if you boil them...
If you boil a hop for an hour to get the bitterness, you boil off all the delicate, highly volatile aromatic oils.
Like the myrcene.
Yes. Oils like myrcene, which gives that green, resinous, piney note. Or linalool, which is floral, or limon and geraniol, which provide the massive grapefruit, lemon, and orange aromas that totally define modern American IPAs.
Right, you lose all of that in the boil.
Completely.
Yeah.
So to capture those, brewers have to add the hops after the liquid has cooled down, usually during or after fermentation.
Hence, dry hopping.
Right. So by explicitly highlighting both the bitterness and the citrus aroma in the poem, Michelle is acknowledging the entire spectrum of hop chemistry in just 2 lines.
That is incredibly efficient writing.
It is. But beyond the chemistry, there is a tiny, brilliant visual detail in that April illustration that I found fascinating.
What's that?
Well, Daryl is standing in a field of hops, the essential ingredient for beer. But if you look closely, he is holding up a wine glass.
I cut that too. It feels like a very deliberate Easter egg.
It has to be deliberate. By placing a wine glass in the middle of a hop harvest, the visual actively bridges the gap between different fermentation traditions.
I love that.
It subtly reinforces that while the book is titled A Year in Beer, the brand holds a deep appreciation for the broader world of wine and spirits as well.
It shows that agriculture, fermentation, and the resulting community celebrations are all part of the same interconnected family tree.
Exactly.
Speaking of celebrations, the April section introduces a concept that I think is just brilliant. April 6th is designated as New Beer's Eve.
The psychology behind that is genuinely clever.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The book lays out the logic. National Day of Beer falls on April 7th. Therefore, to properly prepare for such a momentous occasion, you obviously require a day of preparation.
Naturally.
Hence, New Beer's Eve on April 6th. The book just says, need we say more? And honestly, no, they don't. But why do we do this? Why do we have Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, All Hallows Eve?
Well, because anticipation is a deeply ingrained, highly powerful psychological mechanism.
Right.
When a society creates an eve for a holiday, they're effectively stretching the dopamine hit of the event. We are carving out specific time and space to gather, to strategize our celebrations, and to build communal excitement before the main event even occurs.
The preparation itself calcifies into a ritual.
Exactly. By establishing New Year's Eve, the book playfully taps into that human desire to build up to a shared experience.
Yeah.
The act of sitting at the tap room on the 6th, debating with your friends about which specific beers you are going to open on the 7th, that becomes just as meaningful as the drinking itself.
I am fully on board with adopting New Year's Eve into my calendar.
Same here.
Now, as the book moves us from the fresh beginnings of spring, it transitions right into the heavy heat of summer. Let's look at July.
Yes. Independence Day.
Because this is where we see the book really leaning into humor to deliver its history.
There are lots of laughs in this book along with the historical tidbits. The July section perfectly encapsulates how they manage that tone.
It really does. Michelle paints this dusk or nighttime scene. There is a lovely cherry blossom tree anchoring the background.
And Daryl is sitting cross-legged right on top of a wooden barrel.
Holding up a glass shaped like a boot. And the person he is sharing a drink with is George Washington.
The founding father himself.
Washington is in full Revolutionary War era attire. The deep blue coat, the gold trim, the breeches. He's standing there holding a tall, frothy glass of beer.
And the dialogue here is just perfect taproom banter.
I have to admit, when I first read the dialogue they wrote for this scene, I rolled my eyes a tiny bit because it is incredibly cheesy.
Oh, it's peak dad joke territory.
Right. Daryl looks over and asks, "What did you think of that cherry wheat?" And George Washington replies, "I cannot tell a lie. I tapped that."
It is pure, unadulterated taproom humor.
Exactly. It's cheesy on paper, but when you think about it in the context of sitting at a loud, lively bar after a pint or two, it's exactly the kind of joke that lands perfectly.
And if we analyze what they're actually doing with that joke, it's a very layered piece of writing.
Let's hear it.
First, they invoke the famous American folklore of young George Washington and the cherry tree. I cannot tell a lie.
Right.
Second, they tether that myth directly to a modern craft beer style, the cherry wheat, which is a massively popular summer style.
Huge in July.
And third, they deliver the punchline using modern colloquial slang. I'd tack that. Which obviously refers to the physical act of tapping a keg, but it carries that cheeky, slightly irreverent double meaning.
It's so clever.
This is why the educational aspect of the book succeeds. It gives you the historical flavor, pairs a founding father with a relevant holiday, but uses a genuine, groan-inducing joke to keep the reader engaged.
It completely circumvents the feeling of being lectured to.
Exactly.
That rebellious, independent spirit of George Washington and the summer colonies doesn't just stay in July, though. It actually mirrors the fierce independence and strict traditions of the European brewers we meet as we transition into the autumn.
Oh, the autumn.
Let's move into September and October, which, historically and agriculturally, has to be the most critical season for beer globally.
Without question. The autumn harvest is the historical peak of the brewing calendar.
Let's start with what the book highlights as the Great Oktoberfest Paradox. Because, as the source points out, and as many people are surprised to learn, Oktoberfest actually takes place almost entirely in September.
It is the most common point of confusion for casual consumers.
I used to be so confused by it.
And the historical context behind it is fascinating. The book touches on the origin. Oktoberfest did not organically begin as an agricultural harvest festival. It began as a highly specific Bavarian wedding celebration.
Wait, so if it started as a wedding, at what point exactly did they decide to completely shift the calendar? Was there a specific year the weather was so bad they just gave up?
Let's look at the timeline. Historically, it began on October 12, 1810.
Okay.
It was a massive public celebration for the marriage of Crown Prince Ludwig, who later became King Ludwig I, to Princess Therese of Saxony-Hildburghausen.
That is quite the name.
It is. The citizens of Munich were invited to attend the festivities held on the fields in front of the city gates, which were subsequently named Theresienwiese, Therese's Meadow.
Ah, I've heard that term.
Right. The party, which included horse races, was such a massive morale-boosting success for the populace that they decided to repeat the agricultural show and the races the following year.
And it just snowballed from there.
It evolved into an annual event. However, over the subsequent decades, as the festival grew into a massive carnival, the organizers faced the logistical reality. Late October weather in Bavaria can be bitterly cold and unpredictable.
Nobody wants to drink outside in freezing rain.
Exactly. So to maximize attendance, allow for longer daylight hours, and ensure the wealthy patrons were comfortable, the dates were gradually shifted backward into the much warmer, more predictable days of late September.
That makes total sense.
The final weekend usually spills over into the very first days of October, which allows it to keep the name Oktoberfest, even though the vast majority of the consumption happens in September.
That is amazing. It was essentially a multi-decade logistical adjustment for better party weather.
Basically, yeah.
And the book explicitly highlights the official beer style that anchors Oktoberfest, which is the Märzen.
The classic.
The illustration for this is great. Daryl is standing on a stack of 3 barrels right in the middle of a bustling Bavarian village square. You see half-kimbered buildings, the iconic blue and white Bavarian pennant banners everywhere.
People sitting at long communal wooden tables.
Yes, and Daryl is in his lederhosen holding the boot glass again. And the text points out a really cool linguistic detail. Märzen literally translates to the word March.
Which introduces another paradox. Why is the definitive beer for a September festival named after the month of March?
Well, the book explains that it is brewed in March and allowed to age so that it is ready to drink by late summer. But what was the actual necessity driving that? Why couldn't they just brew it in August?
Because before the invention of commercial refrigeration in the late 19th century, brewing beer in the heat of the summer was essentially a guaranteed recipe for spoilage.
Oh, because of the heat.
We have to look at the microbiology. Beer relies on yeast. During the summer, warm temperatures caused wild, unpredictable airborne yeasts and aggressive bacteria like lactobacillus or pediococcus to thrive.
And those will ruin a batch, right?
Instantly. If a brewer tried to ferment a batch in July, those wild microbes would infect the wort, turning the beer sour, cloudy, and completely undrinkable.
So it was a literal matter of survival for the product.
Exactly. In fact, in 1553, the Duke of Bavaria decreed an absolute ban on brewing between April 23rd and September 29th, just to prevent the waste of precious grain on spoiled beer.
Wow, a literal ban.
So Bavarian brewers had a strict final window for making beer safely. They would brew their final, strongest batches in March the Märzen. To ensure it survived the long, hot summer, they would brew it slightly stronger, with a higher alcohol by volume, and they would add significantly more hops.
Because hops preserve it.
Yes, both alcohol and the alpha acids in hops act as natural antimicrobial preservatives. Then they would take these barrels and store them, or lager them, which comes from the German word lagern, meaning to store in deep, cool alpine caves.
And they pack them with ice.
Often packing the caves with massive blocks of ice harvested from nearby lakes during the winter.
So the beer would just sit there, aging silently in the dark near freezing caves all summer long.
Correct. The cold temperatures suppressed the wild bacteria and allowed the specific bottom-fermenting lager yeast to slowly and cleanly process the sugars.
That is fascinating.
By the time the grain harvest rolled around in late September, the March beer was perfectly aged, incredibly smooth, and heavily malt-forward. And practically speaking, they had to drink it all during the autumn festivals to empty the barrels so they could store the new season's grain harvest.
Oh, to reuse the
It
barrel.
was a perfect cycle of agricultural necessity, birthing a globally beloved flavor profile.
That completely changes how I view a Märzen. It's an act of historical preservation.
It really is.
And the book includes a text box right on the barrel Daryl is standing on that highlights an incredible exclusivity rule regarding the modern festival.
Oh, the 6 breweries rule.
Yes, it says the only official breweries that can be served at Oktoberfest are Hofbräu, Augustiner, Hackershore, Lowenbräu, Polander, and Spetten. Only 6. Out of all the thousands of amazing breweries in Germany, only 6 have the right to pour.
And we should examine what that strict exclusivity rule actually represents regarding German socioeconomics and cultural preservation.
I would love to know why.
Those 6 breweries are the only ones allowed to serve on the Theresienwiese because they meet incredibly stringent, fiercely protected criteria. First, they must physically brew their beer within the municipal city limits of Munich.
Geographic boundaries?
They have to rely on the city's specific deep well water. Second, they must adhere flawlessly to the Reinheitsgebot, the German beer purity law originally enacted in 1516.
I've heard of the purity law, but was it actually about purity or was there an economic motive behind it?
It was heavily economic. The original 1516 decree stated that beer could only be made from 3 ingredients: water, barley, and hops.
No yeast.
They didn't even know yeast existed yet. They just knew leaving the liquid exposed to the air caused it to magically ferment.
That's wild.
But the true purpose of the Reinheitsgebot wasn't just to stop brewers from using weird toxic herbs to flavor their beer. It was a form of medieval price control. And more importantly, it was designed to prevent brewers from buying up all the wheat and rye.
Why did they care about the wheat and rye?
Because wheat and rye were desperately needed by the bakers to make bread to feed the populace. By forcing brewers to only use barley, which makes terrible bread, by the way, the government stabilized the food supply.
Wow, so it was food security legislation masked as purity.
Exactly. When you drink one of those 6 official Oktoberfest beers today, you are tasting a direct, unbroken lineage of legislation, agriculture, and tradition that stretches back over 500 years. It is a living museum.
It gives me chills thinking about it like that. You are quite literally drinking history.
You are.
So that anchors September. As we roll into October itself, the book highlights some amazing modern festivities to balance out the deep historical ones. For example, October 9th is International Beer and Pizza Day.
A phenomenal, universally understood pairing.
The absolute best. And I love the beautifully simple logic the book provides for why this pairing works. Michelle wrote, "Pizza is made with grain, and so is beer."
You cannot argue with that baseline truth.
You really can't. They are culinary cousins. The illustration shows these big, beautiful pumpkins, a rustic wooden sign, and it perfectly sets that crisp autumn mood. It advises the reader, celebrate this day with your favorite pie, complemented with your favorite brew.
That simple statement connects the agricultural roots of both items perfectly. Both rely entirely on the careful cultivation, harvesting, and processing of grain. It's a great reminder that beer is, at its core, liquid agriculture.
Liquid agriculture, that's a great phrase. I'm stealing that.
Consider it yours.
The book also highlights that the first Friday of October is Barrel-Aged Beer Day.
Ah, yes.
The text tells us to enjoy a deliciously brewed beer that has been aged to perfection in a previously spirited barrel.
If we look at the broader picture of the modern craft brewing industry, barrel aging has evolved from a niche experiment into an absolute high-stakes art form.
It really has.
The source mentions that each barreled batch develops a unique flavor profile based on 2 main variables: the specific type of barrel used and the duration of the aging process. But the chemistry happening inside that wood is staggering.
Let's get into that chemistry. Because it's not just a wooden bucket, right?
Right.
The barrel is actively changing the beer.
Oh, absolutely. The barrel becomes an active, highly volatile ingredient in the recipe. When a cooper builds an oak barrel for the bourbon industry, they have to scorch the inside of it with fire.
The char.
Right. This charring process does several things. The intense heat breaks down the hemicellulose in the oak into simple wood sugars, which then caramelize.
Okay, so you get sweetness.
And it degrades the lignin in the wood into volatile phenols, specifically vanillin. And it creates lactones, which produce that distinct coconut flavor.
So when a brewer gets their hands on that empty bourbon barrel.
Exactly. When a brewery takes a massive viscous imperial stout and pumps it into that freshly emptied Kentucky bourbon barrel, a complex extraction process begins.
How long does that take?
Over months or years. As the temperature in the barrel room fluctuates, the wood naturally expands and contracts. It literally breathes the beer in and out of the charred staves.
That is such a cool mental image.
The beer acts as a solvent. slowly extracting those caramelized sugars, the vanillin, the toasted coconut lactones, and the distinct residual warmth of the bourbon trapped deep within the grain.
And it changes the mouthfeel too, right?
Definitely. Barrels are slightly porous. They allow for microoxygenation, a tiny, steady ingress of oxygen that slowly oxidizes the beer, mellowing out harsh alcohols and creating complex, sherry-like, dark fruit notes.
What if they use a wine barrel instead?
If they use a barrel that previously held red wine instead of bourbon, the beer might extract harsh tannins and sharp acidic fruit characteristics, requiring the brewer to blend it meticulously. It requires a brewer to act like a mad scientist and a master chef simultaneously.
It's like the barrel has a physical memory of the spirit it held before, and it's slowly sharing that memory with the beer over the course of a year. That is so poetic.
It really is.
And speaking of the season, as we move through October toward Halloween, the book gives us Daryl dressed up as a pirate.
The Halloween illustrations are great.
He's got the pirate hat with the skull and crossbones, an eye patch, the full getup. He's standing on a path covered in autumn leaves in front of a slightly spooky haunted house.
But instead of a plastic pumpkin bucket for candy,
Exactly. He's holding a classic orange jack-o'-lantern bucket filled with bottles of beer on ice. The sign next to him says, "Drinking a pumpkin beer makes the season complete. Added to any style of beer, it's the best Halloween treat." It captures that cozy, slightly spooky, incredibly fun taproom vibe of late October perfectly.
it creates a wonderful dichotomy within the autumn section.
How do you mean?
Well, it moves you from the deep, reverent, highly legislated history of the Oktoberfest purity laws straight into the pure, modern, playful enjoyment of American brewers throwing hundreds of pounds of roasted pumpkin, cinnamon, nutmeg, and clove into a brew kettle just to celebrate the season.
It honors both the sacred and the playful sides of the industry.
Exactly. It doesn't take itself too seriously.
So, as the harvest fully ends and the weather turns bitter cold, we flip the calendar pages toward winter. Let's talk about the winter warmers and a massive foundational milestone in alcohol history that happens in December.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is a defining, traumatic, and ultimately triumphant moment, particularly for American social and economic history.
The end of Prohibition.
Right.
The book features a lovely, understated illustration of a gift box wrapped with a red ribbon. And the text details the timeline for us, which actually cleared up a misconception I had. It says, although the repeal of Prohibition was signed into law in March of 1933, it became official on December 5th, 1933, which we celebrate as National Repeal Day.
That timeline is so important. The book points out something many people gloss over. The Cullen-Harrison Act was signed in March by FDR, which legalized low-alcohol beer up to 3.2%.
Oh, just the low ABV stuff.
Right. But the total repeal, the ratification of the 21st Amendment overturning the 18th Amendment, didn't hit the finish line until December 5th.
So why is December 5th such a massive deal compared to the March signing?
Because December 5th represented the complete resurrection of a decimated American industry. For 13 years, the Volstead Act made the legal production, sale, and transport of intoxicating liquors banned in the United States.
13 years. Think about the economic devastation.
Thousands of historic family-owned regional breweries were forced to close their doors forever. A massive network of agricultural support, the hop farmers in New York, the barley growers in the Midwest, they lost their primary buyers overnight.
How did any brewery survive a 13-year ban? That seems impossible to weather financially.
The ones that survived had to pivot radically and brilliantly. Youngly, America's oldest brewery, famously survived by opening a dairy across the street and pivoting to making ice cream.
I love that. Beer to ice cream.
Anheuser-Busch utilized their massive infrastructure to produce baker's yeast, infant formula, and even expanded into making ceramic vats.
Wow, they really diversified.
Others made legal malt extract, which was ostensibly sold for baking, but came with very specific winking instructions on what not to do with it, left it accidentally ferment into beer in your bathtub.
That is hilarious, but also shows incredible resilience.
It does. But we also have to understand how Prohibition permanently altered the American palate.
Really? How so?
Before 1920, America had a robust culture of heavy porters, stouts, and aggressively hopped ales brought over by European immigrants. But during those 13 years of drinking harsh, unregulated, often dangerous bootleg liquor, an entire generation lost the taste for bitter, complex beers.
Ah, that makes sense.
When Repeal Day finally arrived, brewers needed to produce beer cheaply and quickly during the Great Depression. They started heavily using adjuncts cheaper fermentables like corn and rice to lighten the body and flavor of the beer, making it more palatable to a public that had forgotten what traditional beer tasted like.
Wow.
That gap in history is the direct reason why the American light adjunct lager dominated the global market for the next 70 years.
I never connected the rise of the light lager directly to the palate cleansing effect of Prohibition. That's incredible. And you can feel the emotional weight of that era ending in the quote printed on that little gift box in the
What
book.
does it say?
It says, "It became clear. We could cheers with beer without fear."
Yeah.
That rhyme, cheers with beer without fear. On the surface, it sounds bouncy and playful, but when you think about the reality of Prohibition, the constant fear of violent police raids, the very real danger of going blind from unregulated methanol-laced bootleg alcohol, the organized crime, it's actually a profound summary of what Repeal Day meant. People could finally gather in the light, openly, without hiding in the shadows.
It is a perfect example of how Michelle's poetry manages to remain light on its feet while carrying real historical gravity. She distills 13 years of complex, violent socio-political history into two highly memorable, emotionally resonant lines.
And since we are in December, the book naturally takes us to Christmas.
The Christmas spread is fantastic.
The visual they chose here is just pure, unadulterated joy. It's a cozy, warm room, which you can easily imagine as either Santa's workshop or his private, hidden tap room at the North Pole.
A hidden tap room for Santa would be amazing.
There's a fully decorated Christmas tree glowing softly on the left side of the frame. On the table, there is a beautiful, dark wooden flight board holding 5 differently colored beers, ranging from a pale golden ale, maybe a Pilsner, all the way to a deep, dark, opaque stout.
And Daryl's in his elf gear.
Yes. Daryl is dressed head to toe as an elf, complete with the pointy green hat and the curled shoes, and he is raising a glass alongside Santa Claus himself. Santa is raising a dark pint in return.
You know, the specific inclusion of the flight board in that illustration is a meaningful choice.
Why is that?
A flight of beers inherently represents tasting, sharing, discussing, and experiencing variety. You don't usually order a flight to drink alone in silence. It's a communal, interactive experience.
It totally is. And the toast Daryl gives in this scene is incredibly memorable. The text reads, "Daryl lifts his beer in a toast. May your future be bright. Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good flight."
It's just so clever.
It takes arguably the most famous Christmas line in literature and twists it just enough to perfectly fit the taproom crowd. To me, this scene really emphasizes how the book constantly finds fresh, clever ways to toast life's moments. It takes familiar traditions and recontextualizes them for the beer enthusiast.
And that recontextualization leads us perfectly into analyzing the overarching philosophy of this book.
Okay, let's go there.
We've journeyed sequentially through the calendar, but there are much larger foundational themes at play here that zoom out way beyond just the individual months or holidays.
Yes, let's zoom out. I want to transition into discussing the philosophy of the barrel itself and the incredible, tangible power of community that Daryl and Michelle are trying to champion with this project.
The barrel is the key to all of this.
Let's talk about the barrel as a symbol. The source material contains this beautiful, anchoring passage. I'm going to paraphrase it a bit because I want to capture the essence of what they are saying.
Go for it.
They point out that alcohol has been a massive, deeply intertwined part of human history, affecting our social, cultural, and economic developments. And they note that barrels have been around for thousands of years, playing a huge part in that exact history.
Thousands of years.
They write that within each barrel stave, the aging process has been the beginning of celebration, ritual, and community connection, from the ancient past right through to the modern day, and it will continue to be for years to come.
Let's break down the mechanics of why that is such a powerful, accurate observation.
Please do.
In the modern era, we often look at a wooden barrel and just see a rustic container, a decorative storage vessel. But what the book is asking us to understand is that the simple wooden barrel is quite literally a marvel of ancient engineering and a time capsule of human social development.
The Cooper's art, right?
Exactly. Think about the geometry and physics required thousands of years ago to harvest oak, cut it into specific staves, bend those staves using heat and moisture without snapping them, bind them with hoops, and make the entire structure perfectly watertight without the use of any modern glues or synthetic sealants.
It's mind-blowing when you really think about it.
It was a revolutionary leap in logistics. The barrel allowed humans to store vital caloric energy safely. It allowed us to preserve liquids for incredibly long ocean voyages. preventing scurvy and dehydration.
It basically facilitated global trade routes.
It absolutely did. But beyond the pure economics, the barrel represents the concept of patience.
Oh, I like that.
The chemical aging process happening inside that cellular structure of the wood cannot be artificially rushed. It forces an entire community to wait. It forces them to anticipate the final product.
Like we were talking about with New Year's Eve.
Exactly. And when that barrel is finally tapped, whether it's an Oktoberfest Märzen or an aged stout, it inherently creates a moment of ritual. The physical object of the barrel holds the entire history of our social connections.
So what does this all mean for us? Bringing that massive historical weight into the present day, what is the core real-world mission of Daryl on a Barrel?
It's a big mission.
Because it's clearly not just about selling a fun, illustrated book. Daryl has a much broader goal. The source explicitly tells us that Daryl hopes to use the brand to bring awareness to and to actively promote the local breweries, wineries, tap houses, and distilleries that make up the fabric of our communities.
He wants to shine a spotlight on these physical spaces.
And there is a specific piece of data included in the source material that perfectly illustrates why focusing on local physical communities is so vital right now.
This raises an important question, actually.
I am so glad you brought that up because this fun fact honestly caught me completely off guard.
It's a staggering statistic.
The source states, most Americans live within 10 miles of a craft brewery.
10 miles.
I'm going to say that again because it's wild. Most Americans live within 10 miles of a craft brewery.
That statistic raises a vital question for all of us regarding how we engage with our local environments. Sociologists often talk about the concept of the third place.
The third place.
Yeah. Your home is your first place. Your workplace is your second place. But a healthy society desperately needs a third place. A neutral, accessible, communal space where people can gather, socialize informally, and build civic bonds.
And tap rooms have basically become the modern third place.
Exactly. If we have these incredibly vibrant, creative, active spaces sitting right in our own backyards, literally within a 10-mile radius of our front doors, how are we interacting with them?
Or are we just driving past them?
Right, because these local tap rooms serve as modern community hubs in the exact same way that the English Village pub or the German beer hall did hundreds of years ago.
They really do.
They are the places where people decompress after a long day, where local ideas are exchanged, where regional musicians get their start, where local charities hold their fundraisers.
And crucially, when neighbors actually meet face-to-face in an era that is becoming increasingly isolated and digital.
When Daryl and Michelle say their goal is to promote these places, they aren't just shilling for alcohol sales. They are saying they want to promote and protect community connection.
The beverage in the glass is simply the catalyst for the human interaction.
Exactly. The beverage is the excuse we use to get together.
I love that perspective. And to support that incredible community-focused mission, the source tells us exactly where we can find the book.
Because you definitely want to pick this up.
First of all, you can obviously go directly to their website at darylonabarrel.com. But fitting perfectly with their overarching mission to support local independent businesses, you can also physically purchase the book at various breweries, tap houses, convenience stores, and local gift shops.
They are actively putting the book out there in the community spaces it celebrates.
And if you want to stay updated on what Daryl is up to, see what new breweries he's hanging out at, and follow this whimsical journey, you can follow the brand on their social media sites, specifically Facebook and Instagram.
They're using the digital space to point people back to the physical community.
And as it is prominently and explicitly stated in all of their materials, which is vital when dealing with an industry based on alcohol. With all this talk of celebration, history, and community gathering, their ultimate sign-off is always an important, non-negotiable reminder. Please drink responsibly.
Always. Please drink responsibly.
It is the only way to ensure that the community stays safe, the tap rooms stay open, and the celebrations can continue for years to come.
Absolutely.
Wow, what an absolute journey today. We started by sitting at a bar stool in Michigan with Michelle and Daryl, and we mentally traveled alongside them across 300 breweries in 17 different states.
We covered a lot of ground.
We moved through the historical months of the year, diving deep into the hop chemistry of April, navigating the cheesy but historically layered humor of sharing a cherry wheat with George Washington in July.
Good old George.
We unpacked the massive, centuries-old logistical, agricultural, and socioeconomic weight of the Oktoberfest Reinheitsgebot in autumn, and we explored the absolute triumphant joy of surviving Prohibition with Repeal Day in December.
A true year in beer.
And I think the biggest takeaway for me from this entire deep dive is the realization that beer history, wine history, spirits history, it really is just human
It's
history.
a story of us.
It's the story of how we utilize agriculture to survive, how we adapt to our climates, and how we connect with one another. Daryl on a Barrel takes all of that heavy technical history and wraps it up in a package that ensures, as the book itself wonderfully says, you never drink alone. Whether you're a seasoned brewer, a casual sipper, or someone who just loves a good story with their glass, this book will help you discover the joy of celebrating each month with the right brew in hand.
It is a truly remarkable synthesis of dense history and genuine heart. And as we wrap up our analysis today, I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over.
Lay it on us.
We've talked extensively today about how wooden barrels have captured the history of the past. We've seen how they facilitated massive Bavarian weddings centuries ago, and how they toasted the triumphant end of Prohibition in 1933.
Right.
But I want you to think about that 10-mile radius statistic we just discussed. Think about the thousands of wooden barrels sitting in that local craft brewery, just a few miles down the road from your house right now.
Sitting right there in your community.
They're sitting there today, aging silently in the dark, breathing the beer in and out of the charred staves. As those complex esters and vanillins slowly develop over the next year, what future historical moment, what completely unwritten personal celebration in your own community are those very barrels quietly waiting to toast?
That is a beautiful, grounded thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive today. Keep exploring those tap rooms within your 10-mile radius. Stay incredibly curious about the complex agricultural history swirling around you, and always take a moment to appreciate the centuries of human stories sitting right there in your glass. Cheers, everyone.